This is awesome, folks. You didn't think Taylor Swift was showing up, or did you, or something? Yeah, that's why she can draw the crowds. I don't know. So, well, thank you for coming. It's a beautiful day to be out, isn't it? And stuff. So, I put a PowerPoint presentation. I hope you'll enjoy. I got some friends up here that carry all the books. They get kind of heavy and stuff like that. So, Brian Sykes is from Georgia, came up. He's originally from Cameron, worked for Norfolk Southern Railroad, and a good friend of mine, and he was free. He said he'd come over. Jeff Ellison lives in Baldwin, trained nut up the gazoo there, and we do a lot of activities. Brian Sykes works for Burlington Northern Santa Fe, took off a little work, and he's collaborating with me on a couple of books and all kinds of stuff. So pretty good friends. We're going out to eat afterwards and stuff, so it'll be a fun day. So, I put together about 120 pictures. A lot of them are from the Ellsworth line, but they're not all the Ellsworth line. Some of you bought a book, some of you will buy a book. It's not a repeat of a whole book. So I'm going to try and keep it entertaining for you that you'll enjoy. And 120, I cut it down to 120. I hate to say it, when I put these together, this is my 85th show like this. And it's customized for the group. By the way, before I forget, I'm going to be doing the same thing next Monday night in River Falls at 6:30. And if some of your friends couldn't make it, I'll be back down there on Monday night at the public library. Yeah, there's a group that meets every so often like they do here and stuff. Do they have a bigger room? So, hey, it's cozy, we'll open the windows or something. So I got about 120 pictures. I wanted to make it worth your time and money. You did have to pay to get in, didn't you? No? I'm doing this for nothing? No, I really enjoy it. You guys have a question? Thank you. They're my friends, but I'm trying to talk. If you want to do it, Jeff has heard this so many times, he could probably do it. If you have a question, just raise your hand and yell it out. I'm supposed to repeat it. I don't pretend to be an expert. One reason I bring these guys here. In fact, I was going to go back last night and look through the Ellsworth book for some facts and stuff like that, and I forgot to and stuff. When you've done 8 books working on number 9, the dates are the hardest thing to remember. When did this happen and this happen? They're in the book, but I can't always remember it. The other thing, this is a great little system if you can see it, and I'll move around, but they don't have a clicker. So my clicker is a pad over here. So Brian, when I go like that, it's going to try and... All right, let's get rolling. Does anybody recognize the depot when it was here? And I can't remember when did it disappear, get torn down, about? 92, 95? After the UP took over. Okay, so I wish I would have seen it. I wasn't quoting, I was still working a job. I wasn't in the trains and stuff like that. So there it is, a little older time. And I wonder if my pointer should work on this. But this is in the, it doesn't work very good. So this is the depot. That over there is the beanery. Anybody know what a beanery is?
That's where you eat food.
That's where you eat food. That's where they ate. So a little beanery. And the track going down there went to the Ellsworth line. So right up here is split up. And so that went down to River Falls and Ellsworth. So train on the right, we think it's the Nemacolin. Anybody heard of the Nemacolin? Very famous passenger train, ran from the cities and ran up to Ashland. And so I think that's waiting there. Okay. That depot's still standing. That's the city depot, it's called, right down here in Hudson. It's a private business right now. Okay, that engine, number 55, ran most of the trains, as I understand, on the Ellsworth line in the early days. It's an SW1 600 horsepower. It would have a lot of trouble probably handling more cars than that coming up on the hill here to get up. So, but it was very popular. And it was painted black with the yellow stripes. So, if you're wondering how it got out of Hudson, the rail line is right behind the sign here, and I think the next picture shows right here. So it's climbing up this hill, and then across the highway, the bridge is gone, of course, the rail bridge on that shot right there.
It was
Was that you standing on the interstate taking that picture?
My buddy was driving even. I didn't even do it when I was driving. So I snapped that. But in the fall of the year, you can see that right away. A lot of us like to chase old right away, see where the trains went. That's a lot of fun. Okay, there's a shot of the bridge going across it. Trying to find a picture of a train going across there, though, at that time is really hard. And there is, I don't have it in here. There are a couple in the book. They're not real good pictures of 55. So, Prescott Road, they had to have a waiting shelter. So it's not really a depot, but you call it that there. And they have a stop for people to get out into the weather and stuff. So most of them are old train cars, like an old box car or something. Have a door on the end usually. So I couldn't find any of Prescott Road, and after the book got done, Aaron Marks emailed me and sent me that picture, and I said, great, I can use it in the show at least, but it's not in the book. And Glover, or Glover's Road, whatever, there was a little depot there. I could not find a picture. People have been emailing me, can you give me a picture of it? I don't have one. They'd like to get one. So the closest I come, it's a snow cut there, and you see the word Glover up on the sign. That was a really bad picture to begin with. And with Photoshop. Down at River Falls. These are maps showing River Falls. Of all the books I've done, the first ones I did were based on the lumber industry. I don't want to get into that, but most of you know the white pine industry up in northern Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota was extravagant until about 1900. But River Falls was not based on lumber. They'd ship some lumber out, but it was based on wheat, the flour mills. I was going to look. What'd they have, 5, 6 flour mills down there? Unbelievable. When I heard that, I said, it's a small town. How can you do that? You can't eat that much bread, can you? Some of
They shipped out almost trainloads of cabbage.
That's right, cabbage too, right. They shipped a lot of wheat out of Washburn, Wisconsin, up north of Ashland. So the train would haul out train loads, and it'd come right up through Hudson, and then it'd go up through Spooner, and it'd go up through next to Ashland into Washburn. And they'd ship it out to wherever on the lakes there. So, and why it died, I just learned in a picture show, wheat blight hit. And Wisconsin had a lot of wheat apparently at one time, but that was the main thing that, that killed that industry. So when I started this book, I drove down River Falls. I couldn't figure out where that rail line was, you know. Then you've got some friends. Brian Gilbert, were you with me? I had a couple of trips where the locals took me out and showed me where stuff. Once you know where it was, things become a lot more evident, you know. So it's really fun doing that. But what's kind of interesting here was 1882, it came down the river back. I didn't mean to click. It had to come out of the river here. Oh, we don't want to do that again. Am I doing that?
No, he's doing that.
Oh, wise. Oh, okay. I'll laser him right here.
This will be our last show.
It took 3 years for them to get up out of that basin down there to figure out a way. And they had to blast rock, and I think I got a couple pictures. Having a little trouble with that?
Yeah, it's got to reduce here. Okay. There you go.
Well, you reduced all right.
Go hit the one you want. Go tap the one you want.
So they're going this way.
Number 12.
I guess 12. I'll come back and show you. There's the River Falls Depot. I don't know how many passenger trains would have 3 cars at least on them coming down here. It might have been a special excursion or something. That's what's there now. So if you wonder where the depot was, we figured that out. So that's why you can't see that. And there is one of the mills down there. It's kind of neat. Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha. The Omaha Road became Chicago Northwestern. But it's a pretty neat shot, isn't it? Sleighs, farmers bringing in the wheat, I suppose, to ship out and stuff. And there's a lot of signage around River Falls, really neat. One of the mills was the Junction Mill. It tells you exactly where they were. So if you walk around down there, it's really cool. And Dan Geister sent me this. This was a scale house to weigh the cars, and that was, does it say what it was? It looks like it could have been a coal shed with all the little doors. I think it probably was.
In the book, it says it was a coal shed.
Okay. I got to read my own books. There's some... The river down there always causes problems. You got to get bridges. That was a pretty neat bridge, huh? Kind of a long one there. Here is how they got out of the river basin up on the hill. They had to blast, it wasn't a tunnel, but the roads are going over it. Blast a channel, I guess, probably the best word.
It went under Cascade Street.
Cascade and?
And Main Street didn't go straight through. It had a jog in it there to allow that to go under Cascade.
Okay. And there are two bridges. Which one is Cascade? Doesn't matter, probably. First one, and the other one is Spring Street, isn't it? I think the other one is Spring Street.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Cascade and Spring.
So would that be Johnson Hall under the bridge?
Oh, I think it is.
I think that's right.
I was wondering if they built that, so the line went through and they said Johnson Hall.
You go down there now, you'd never guess, you know, they filled it in right away. As soon as the railroad's abandoned, they filled it in. Isn't it nice that some people were rail fans in those days and shot some pictures that, you know, you got to really search for them, but that's pretty cool. There's a little settlement called Sherma south of River Falls, and that was their depot. I got to remember. Yeah, I think it was the Slovakians that were in that area.
That guy's pretty tall.
That is unbelievable. He's not standing on anything either, is he? He's got to be a 7, yeah.
It's not a regular door, it's got a sliding boxcar.
It's a sliding boxcar. A lot of them are old passenger cars that have the door on the end. There's the Beldenville Depot. Brian could show you right where it was.
Hey, Arlen, was that in the book? I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah.
Was it?
I'm sure it's in there.
Okay.
Yep.
Better reread it.
And this is the area where that was in the stockyard and stuff down there. You can drive right around there, but if you get down through there, that's where that was. This is highway, help me, 65? 65, right? Trains weren't massive in those days. And you didn't have enough people to dedicate passenger trains, so what they do is they put a car at the end called a combine that was baggage and passengers. That was their caboose. They didn't run the cabooses that we normally think of. Not a lot of business, small engines. They have one tank car today.
Sears ship stuff.
So now we got a big train, huh? 2 boxcars and a gondola, but those are really cool pictures. They catch a train out there. If you drive down there, of course, the highway's a lot wider, but you can see right where it was, the hill there and stuff. It's cut back, but.
Was that in the early teens or 20s, you think, those pictures? Yeah.
I would say the 20s.
Yeah, they have some hints in this book.
That might be by Shady Grove Restaurant.
Shady Grove Restaurant?
If you look, yeah, coming from Ellsworth North,
Okay,
you can see the abutments still there.
yep. There's the depot. You drive down that area, most of it's creamery now, right, I guess, but you can kind of figure out exactly where it came into town and everything. Some of the pictures you get aren't super high quality, but Photoshop, they even have a sharpen button that helps a little bit. And we're happy to get anything, so I'm not complaining about the quality, but that's kind of cool, but it's coming in.
Okay.
A lot of industry there, the oil unloading platform, the water tower. So, and to go back north, you don't like to run a steam engine backwards all the way, so you turn them around And they're not motorized unless you call the guys down on the end there motors. Yep, that's an Ellsworth. They're normally called an Armstrong turntable because you use strong arms, I guess. I don't think the Armstrong company made them. But you put the engine right on the center and balance it, and it wasn't that hard, I guess, to spin them. I can't imagine in the winter when it's full of snow and ice, though, that it had to be a little harder. You know, had to clean it out, I'm sure, and stuff. All right, I'm going to jump off that a little bit and try and show you some other stuff. This is Spring Valley, and the depot was right downtown, essentially. A lot of you recognize the big hill in the back. That's the earthen dam. I got to look it up again. Was that the largest earthen dam in Wisconsin, the Midwest, or something? And so it dammed up the O'Galley River. Oh, what it's famous for, one of the main reasons Spring Valley Line was built is for iron ore. And it's hard to believe there's a smelter right down in Spring Valley, right down where the athletic fields are. And that's the remnant there, but it's falling down. I heard they're going to take it down. I don't think I haven't heard they took it down.
I was just there. It's still up.
They got it fenced off because people would try and climb up in there, and it's really dangerous and stuff, so. You get down there. It's unbelievable how big a facility they had for smelting the iron ore down there. And I was back on private property where they mined it. And there's all kinds of rocks laying there that are rusting yet. It's really cool. So there's a lot of iron ore there, but not enough to make it commercial, obviously, and stuff at this age. Another shot of the Spring Valley Depot. And the Old Galley River. You go down there, the Old Galley River looks like a little puddle creek or something until it rains, and then all the water would come down the valley. And it washed out the railroad numerous times. They kept cutting the railroad back to Spring Valley and stuff, but eventually they just had to abandon it. You couldn't keep it going. So there's several pictures in the book of the floods and stuff. Isn't it amazing, the force of water? Even now, the floods they've had around our country, down south and stuff, it's just amazing. So it's hard to control Mother Nature. I got these pictures after I did the book. And a train was going down towards Spring Valley. I think I got the date in here. Yeah, let's see if I do. 58. Kevin Larson contacted me and said, I got some pictures you might want. I said, yeah, because I can add them for the picture shows. So after the engine went over, the bridge gave out. And the passenger car is sitting up there. And it's kind of balanced. I think there was only the conductor on it, if I remember right, or something. So nobody was hurt, but how that whole train didn't go right down into that valley and how it's just balanced there. So anybody know Kevin? He's not here, is he? I only met him once. We met in Baldwin at the Hardee's, and he gave me those pictures. Look at that. How did that car sit up there? I don't know. Yeah, a lot of heavy weight in the front there. There you go. You just got to jump a little bit, that first step. Watch that first step. But that brings up, if anybody runs into any historic railroad pictures, I'd love to get them, to add, to share with people. So, and that describes it, I don't know, his daughter or something. Anyway, we don't need that. Woodville. The Spring Valley line started at Woodville and went south, and it actually went up north to Emerald also. But it used to go right downtown. And you drive down through Woodville now, and it's hard to picture exactly where it went unless you know. because they built a cutoff. That's the downtown depot that was there. Look at downtown. It's amazing. But to get out of town, they had a big snake through the hills and stuff. So they relocated the line that's the existing line. This is the Spring Valley train on the right here, going to go down to Spring Valley. And a line to the left up there goes to Emerald. Straight ahead would be the main line.
Hey, Arlen, that picture might have been taken from, you can believe it or not, Woodville had an interlocking tower.
They did. They had a tower to protect the train movements. So a tower, you know what that, two-story building, small building, with an operator up there to run the signals to make sure the trains didn't crash into each other. You're right. And so this is a bypass they made in 1917. Then they put the station up there. And if you were down here to get up there, you had to climb a bunch of steps. And on the right is a little, what we call them a dumbwaiter for luggage and stuff. Probably rope operated, maybe even motor operated, probably at least early rope operated to get your luggage up there. Pretty cool.
In the wintertime, you can still see the foundation of that depot.
And this is the south end of Spring Valley, so the train is coming from Elmwood there, and it's going to snake up through town. So that's the old Galley River it's going right across. I just love these old pictures. You see the railroad bridge, the carriage bridge for horse and buggy and stuff. But look at the work to put that together. Again, I'm going kind of quick, but this is Elmwood. And stock day was a big thing, shipping out. You didn't bring your stock and leave them in the stock pen there for a week. When they're going to ship, everybody would bring their stock. So the farmers would bring their I guess you want to call them buggies, wagons, with their stock, and now they're going to get weighed and then put on railroad cars, and they'll get paid for it. Be a pretty exciting time. Weston was the end of the line. There was a big lumber mill, and Mr. Weston lived in Eau Claire, but he bought this woods, and so they built the rail line out there. But a neat little depot and a water tower and stuff.
And where's Weston?
Weston would be west of Elmwood.
Southwest of Menominee.
Yeah, right. Yep. On 178, the highway, you're just off one. I can't.
Take kind of County D out of Menominee to County K, I believe it was.
Okay. You drive to Weston now, you won't find exactly where this was. I was there 3 times, I think, trying to figure it out.
One bar there.
One bar. The bar was great. They said, come on in. They had pictures on the wall. Took my computer and scanner in there, sat there. Then they had a hamburger and stuff. But I don't know if it's still open. It closed down shortly after. It's open. But the pictures are probably still there. But I got to tell you about this. I learned a lot of different stuff doing the books. And just like with the cattle, when people wanted to sell their chickens, they would ship them out on a railroad car that looked like that, a poultry car. And they'd advertise in the paper that the poultry car is coming to town. And you see the horse and buggies lined up there, and they're bringing the chickens. Now, I'm going to read something. This is out of the Barron paper, but it'll make sense. That picture was actually taken in Barron. I got some from the other towns, but this was the best quality one, so that's why I used it. The site at the depot was an interesting one. A special poultry car for shipping poultry had been provided. This car is arranged with coops on either side with an aisle down the center of the car. The coops are 5 tiers high, and the car, when full, will hold 5,000 chickens. The farmers were lined up to await their turn at the car. As each man drove up, the chickens and coops in which they were brought were placed upon a scale and weighed. The chickens were taken from the coops and put right into coops on the car, after which the empty coops were reweighed and their weight deducted from the gross weight, leaving the exact weight of the fowls each coop contained. Weigh bills in the nature of an order or check were then made to each farmer to be presented to the Normanna Savings Bank for payment. The buyers paid 7 cents per pound for old hens and 12 cents per pound for spring chickens. The frightened fowls made a terrible commotion as they were taken from the coops and placed in the car. One would think he had gotten into a great barnyard at feeding time to hear the noise. Mr. Gerke, the purchaser, was apparently well satisfied with the business done here and will doubtless return next year for another load. I thought that was really cool. Well, I have a model railroad in my basement. And so, next one. I tried to replicate it. And a model railroad company made that car right there. And so I got some horse and buggies, so not very fancy, the only thing I had at the time. Bought some little coops online, painted the chickens in them, and so they're loading it in there. So I'm really kind of proud of that, you know. It's kind of cool. But I bought that car, and every railroad car's got an individual number, 150-37, can't see that one. This one, you might have a little trouble, is I think 682, it's a little fuzzy on there. I got back home. Can you go back? One more. Look at the car number in Barron. 682. The car I bought and the model is the model of that car that was in Barron. Now, what's the chance of that happening? You know? Yeah.
There's only one car.
Yeah, but what I got that number, you know. All right. Let's go ahead a few there. All right. There are a couple of books on Spring Valley history that Doug Blegan is the one that died. He put those books together. And so I got some pictures out of there. The Blegan family is really nice people, but Jean's husband died. And there's like 3 brothers. I think it's Doug that died. So they're still available, especially at the pharmacy down in Spring Valley if you're interested in that. Lawrence Johnson wrote the book Early Railroad in St. Croix County. He was really into the history of this. He went through all newspapers. He put that book together. Unfortunately, Lawrence died about a year and a half ago. But he gave me countless materials for these 2 area books and stuff. And he had like a little museum at his farm collecting stuff. Really a neat guy. But
He was the biggest Omaha collector in the country.
biggest what?
He was probably the biggest Omaha collector of stuff in the country. I mean, he was crazy about the Omaha.
He'd go to auctions and sales and everything and buy stuff. And so, all right. Anyway, it's no longer in print. So now we're going to jump around. Then in Baldwin, that's the depot that was in Baldwin. And another shot of it in color. This is at Knapp. And this, of course, the water tower. I hadn't even thought about, you know what this would be? I'm quite sure it's a pump house to pump the water in there. You know, in the real early days, they had windmills, but you couldn't count on that for a water supply. So they had a pump house. Anybody know what this big building is over there? That's a coaling shed. So I got another picture I'll kind of show it. And of course, that's a depot over there. This would be called the house track that went behind. So the cars are going to leave to unload for local deliveries to be on the house track. Love this shot. Here's a train coming from Eau Claire. Now I got to stop and think. I thought Eau Claire, maybe it's coming the other way. This is a long ramp up to the coaling tower. So the guy is up at that coaling tower. They take a gondola full of coal and pull it up there and then dump it into that big house. So then when they needed coal for their steam engines, that's where they'd get it. So you don't get a perspective, but you're way up in the air here from down the track level. I like these snap pictures because you're going to see something special in a little bit about that. You might recognize the New Richmond depot still there. Now it's not the Soo line, it's Canadian National. In New Richmond, the line that came out of here that went up to Spooner and Ashland crossed that Soo line. And they had their own depot. So that's the Omaha or Chicago Northwestern depot in New Richmond. It's just north of the Soo line depot would be. But it's so built up now you wouldn't even know. It went right by the Doughboy industry there. There's another shot of it in color.
The first one must have been the original. That must be the second.
You know, I didn't compare them, but you probably flip back one. Sometimes they cut off pieces. So, question: is that depot the same as this one?
Unless he did a lot of modifications.
Yeah, you know.
It could have burned down, and who knows?
I haven't researched that. It's anybody's guess unless somebody knows. This is a very famous landmark. It's called formerly the Arcola Bridge, and I don't know how long it is. I should look up the numbers. How high it is up in the air. It's really cool, and it's used right now. Not very much. There's not many CN trains that go over it, but that's a shot from probably a drone. A high bridge. We know it locally as a high bridge. Yep. And my buddy Brian here has been begging me for years. They closed off the end. You used to be able, there's a county trunk there, and you could go stand and get pictures there, and they kind of closed it off, fenced it off. You really can't get at it now. But my friend Brian over here has been trying to get me to get my boat and go sit down there and wait for a train.
You can hike it on the Minnesota side. You can hike that.
That's how it's going to go. He figured out there's a path down there so you get down to water level. And it'd be about this location, looking back, I suppose, or something.
Well, I took a selfie, looked right up there, with no train coming, but I did yeah.
I worked with a guy that walked out on that bridge one time, and a train came, and he had to get in, they would have barrels periodically. He had to get in one of those barrels so he wouldn't get hit by the train.
And it's a long bridge. It'll take a long time. And it's not easy. There's not a walkway for you there. If you're walking on the ties and stuff, it's really hard to do. Okay. There were several trains that ran between Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Chicago, and they actually competed for passenger travel. Okay. One of them was on the Milwaukee Road called the Hiawatha's. It went on the west side of the Mississippi River. On the east side was the Burlington track. They were normally called the Zephyrs. There was a Sioux line that ran up north there, and it was called the Laker. That's kind of interesting. It came from Chicago, and we got to Owen. It split into two trains. One went to Minneapolis, and one went to Duluth Superior. They call it the Laker. And around here, the famous one is the 400. And that's the Chicago Northwestern train. So this is in its diesel days. Go ahead. I think it started out as steam. And it's called the 400. And without any input, some people, these guys know more than I do. So why was it called the 400?
400 minutes to Chicago, 400 miles, 400 minutes.
I heard it say 406 miles, but you can call it 400, and they make it in 400 minutes, averaging 60 miles an hour. Now, you didn't have many stops, so coming out of Minneapolis, they'd stop at Menominee, Eau Claire, Wyville, I guess.
Did they stop in Maryland? I can't remember.
Part of the time they stopped, early they stopped in Maryland.
Did they? Okay. But not very long, I bet. And when you got down around Fall Creek, Augusta, and the Strait, they were going 90, 100 miles an hour.
The speed limit was maintained at time schedule.
But they had track crews that worked. The rail was not heavy like today's and stuff, but they had section crews that kept that fine-tuned. And so I just can't imagine. You know the number of cars and trucks and stuff that are getting hit by trains nowadays, and they're not going 100 miles an hour? Yeah, a few people did, get hit and stuff, but you don't. I think they probably did. Maybe they're smarter nowadays. I don't know.
They had common sense.
Respect. The speed limit was 95 on straight track and 80 on curves.
Is that right?
That was the speed limit on the 400. My dad and my grandfather both ran.
This is coming out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, or Spud Depot. It was an elegant way to travel. Can you imagine? I didn't have any money, but wouldn't it have been fun to sit on one of those cars and eat a fancy meal? 35 cents for a meal. Of course, 35 cents we didn't have, type of thing, but.
China and silver.
Now, these are posed pictures by the company. I have to admit that, not the general. They're dressed pretty neat. And in the old days, people did dress up a little bit.
People used to fly like that though, too.
Yeah.
You know, everybody dressed
Yeah.
when they traveled.
This is coming into Eau Claire. And they were unique for the round end observation end car. That's the Eau Claire Depot that got torn down. And there's one of those towers we're talking about that would have been at Woodville. That one is at Eau Claire. There are tracks right here for the Sioux Line, Chicago, and the Milwaukee Road crossing. So that operator ran the signals that you see up there and stuff, and actually through the switches. They had big, I hope I put it, I had to cut back. They had big bars up there to throw, and these are the rods that would slide through and turn the switches and stuff. It took a man, probably sometimes two men, to do those. They're well greased, but still, can you imagine in the winter and stuff? That tower is now in Carson Park. If you go down there, that was preserved.
Was it a weighted pulley system that,
I never heard of any weighted pulley, but
something, I don't know why they pull that lever and all these different things would move switches somehow.
I hope let's see if I put it in there. There's a more night shot. A. Robert Johnson took that picture, and he showed those in the 80s at the London Square Mall, and I fell in love with that picture. And when he died, I got into the collection. That's the first picture I bought. Let's go back. Animals aren't smart enough to get off the track. Wildlife, you might be able to scare off with a horn, maybe. Cows, no. And the headlights there, they are bright light coming, you know. And Jeff always likes to crack. They had fresh meat to serve in the diner now.
Tenderized too.
The danger was hogs. Hogs would derail an engine.
Oh, hogs, yeah.
Yeah, they'd roll underneath and.
A bear, maybe, yeah, I hear you. All right. Now, in 1959, that train derailed on the Knapp Hill. I got several pictures. Everybody had asked me about it, and so I did some research. The road down there is Highway 12. We'll give it another shot. We're up a lot over Highway 12. You see the trees there? If those trees weren't there, you can imagine what would happen to those cars. Now, can you imagine riding in those cars, drinking your coffee, and all of a sudden you're bumping along and nobody was killed? I think like 50, 60 people got banged up, were taken to the hospital and checked out. Most of them were just abrasions, maybe a couple broken bones or something. They brought buses from Eau Claire, if you remember those city buses, to haul people out. There's the first train through. They had just been working on the track, and they actually blamed the section crews for not spiking it, anchoring it very good. So the engines made it across, then the rail, if it spread, the cars go down. That's at Eau Claire. Sterling Pulp and Paper, and they got some pulpwood piles. Last train ran on July 23rd, 1963. And there's a group that's been working for, 20, 30 years now, a coalition. It's called, the West Wisconsin Coalition. They're trying to get passenger service from the Twin Cities to Eau Claire. And it's difficult because the Union Pacific wants all their track upgraded, all their signals. It's a lot of money, and it's close enough. Are people going to use it? Some people, but every railroad like that has to be subsidized. And if you start subsidizing how much, and stuff, and so I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but it'd be kind of cool to ride a train there, but for us rail fans, we'll do it once in a while. That doesn't keep it.
The goal is to make it all the way to Chicago. Instead of the double train going through across, they wanted to make a north route as the second train, and they couldn't get the Union Pacific to agree to do it. But it was already upgraded on the old, PN.
Yep. And I think they want to go down through Madison too. So an alternate route so more people could use it. So the Amtrak now's got 2 trains going down. The morning Empire Builder and the afternoon Borealis, and it's being used a lot. Who had a question?
Well, we rode the Borealis about 2 months ago from St. Paul down to Chicago. It was old equipment. Matter of fact, a week after we rode it, they had to quit using the equipment because they found that it was corrosion problems.
Yep.
So they had to come in and put some of the Empire Builder cars on the double decker.
Yep. I think they went back to the original cars again, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
I think I read that.
Yeah, it was a temporary.
If you like riding trains, the best ride for me, take the Empire Builder in the morning, get up in the Viewliner, which is like the lounge car, and it's got big windows. Grab one of the turning seats, padded seats, and sit and watch the Mississippi River go by. And you just take it to La Crosse and catch another train back even or something. It's just an awesome, and it's not that expensive.
With that plan of putting the rail on the north end here, one of the plans was is that the station for Hudson was gonna be out at the corner of Highway 12, where Highway 12 comes up and meets the railroad track. One of the plans was putting this depot out there.
Interesting. Sure.
I used to be on the Hudson Town Board.
Okay. It makes sense. And more parking and everything, and stuff. I'm going to tell.
If you've seen the Borealis, or ridden it, you realize it has engines on both ends because they don't have a place to turn the engine around, so they gotta have engines on both ends of the train.
I'm going to tell you about some of the other books and show you a couple pictures I think you'll find kind of interesting. The Chippewa Valley line went from Wabasha across the Mississippi River, came up through Durand to Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls. Projected to go to Lake Superior, never made it. This is a pretty neat shot down at Durand. One car, I think it's a special train. And I'm guessing they got cases of old style beer. I'm just guessing it's old style beer employees that rented the train for an excursion and they posed there. But that's the cover of that book. And that book, I'm really it took 10 years to collect all the stuff for this book. I'm a member of that speeder club that has those little motor cars down there. This line really, really interested me. So I really dug for stuff. And it came out a lot of stuff in there. The book's pretty thick.
How many pages is in that?
I don't know. That's why I try and keep my costs down, but the more pages, the more it costs me. There's 260 pages in that. So, and some color. All right, I'll try and keep this. Boy, if you have any questions, there's so much interesting stuff on here, but here's one thing. Notice this tender for this. There's a headlight here. Because that's a small engine, so when it was going backwards without any cars, they'd have a headlight on the other end.
No women. There's no women in that shop.
All right. You'll find this kind of interesting. This is Wabasha down here. And they wanted to cross the Mississippi River. See this trestle going here? So they're going to build a trestle almost a mile long across the Mississippi River. See the trestle here? And then to allow the steamboats and the logs and lumber rafts to get through, they built a swinging bridge right there, 400 feet long. It's called a pontoon. It's floating. But they had to adjust it all the time for the water levels. So it's a monster job. But that's how the boats could get through. And then it continues and goes up.
Milwaukee Road had one down in Prairie du Chien too.
There were two at Prairie du Chien, actually, because there are two branches of the Mississippi. And there was one at Chamberlain, South Dakota. So Mr. Lawler built 4 of them. There you can see it in that shot pretty good. So then they filled in some of the trestle here.
That's still there, you can see it in the wintertime, the right of way.
Yep. And this is at Reed's Landing. Another thing you notice, you go down there now, they've been dredging so much, there's a pile of sand out there that's so big, that they take out to have the navigation for the towboats. Usually somebody asks me, what are all these things up here? Those are icebreakers. So they break up the ice, hopefully. Otherwise, the ice could wipe out everything, so they get through. Now, in let's go another one. there. It was really hard to get, the Marquette Bridge is right along Highway 18, and there's all kinds of pictures people taking. Here, there's no highway out there. So I got a picture there. And in 1951, ICE took out this trestle, so they had to quit using that. Then they ran their trains on the other side of the river down to Winona. Like more than we want to get into. My inspiration for my books was the Taylor's Falls and Lake Superior. Richard Thompson, he and his brother Robert started a museum in Chisago City called the Iron Horse Central, and it's still there. Eric, their son's running it, but he's not open this summer, he just told me. But this guy did this book of the same format where we have the history of each town that went through, a map of each town, the railroad map, and pictures of trains in the town and so on. So I modeled all my books after that. Yeah, that's what it looked like. I said, that's the way to do a book. So that's what I tried to emulate in all mine. I give him credit. Unfortunately, he died. Both Richard and Robert are gone. But it's a neat little museum. Now, am I boring you? No. I'm talking awful fast, I know. The first book I did was called Mondovi Line. I went to Leverstrom High School, and the train ran kind of by our high school. And as a kid, poor kid on the farm, we never got any place. So I said, I'm going to do a book on the Mondovi Line. Lindeman is just outside of Osseo, just west of Osseo. This is Highway 10 right back over there. And I got that picture, the first picture I ever got for books, from Lois Gunderson. And I looked at that, I said, wow, what a picture. But look at all those, water spots or something. So I went out and I bought Photoshop, and I started reading. I started going to a couple of night classes, and I spent a little time, and that's how it came out. And that's the first one I did. A lot of old pictures, you got to do that kind of stuff. They're embellished, if you want to say, but rather than put some poor, fuzzy, dark thing, with Photoshop, you can lighten them, even lighten the shadows and stuff. And so, you go back, Brian? The sky's easy. You just paint the sky white. For all these marks, you copy and paste. You take a little picture right here, and you put it on top of it. And you just do that all over the place, and then brighten it and stuff, and that's what you can do to it. So, all right. I live in Barron, and this is our train depot. It still exists. And it's not a train depot, it's now a coffee shop. But I did a book called The Blueberry. It ran north and south from Barron. And I got that pictures from the owners of this place. I said, how neat, but look at all the ink. Well, I think it took me 2 full days, and that's how it looks. Then a guy that's an excellent model builder made a model of that thing. And he came to the Menominee train show, and he showed it to me. I've been trying to build a model. I couldn't come close. With a curvature and everything, I just gave up. It was in a box. I said, if you're ever interested in selling that, just remember me. Here's my card. Sunday night, he said, I don't have a job. I really need some cash. It went home with me. I won't tell you what I paid for it, but there it is on my home layout. I got a lot of people and stuff on it now and stuff too. But, so I'm really happy with that. And if you ever get to Barron, come and have coffee with me. Blueberry Line Cafe. And all assorted coffees and snacks and stuff in there. So I was just on the way over this morning, a buddy called and said, let's meet at the Blueberry. Not him, another guy. I said, sorry, can't make it today.
What gauge is your?
HO.
HO?
Yep. I have spent hundreds, if not thousands, of hours going through microfiche. 6.5 hours yesterday in Rice Lake Library for the next book. It's so interesting, those old newspapers. But this machine in Barron is a yellow background, and you can't save anything. So I go to Rice Lake, they got a nice computer system. You find an article, and you click save to your flash drive, go home and put it in your computer. Oh, it's only 12 miles away. And so I've been going through caching. They send them from the Wisconsin Historical Society. They send them up to the Barron Library, check them out to me, I got them, then I return them and get more of them. It's really interesting, but it takes a lot of time. Here's a museum up in Duluth, if you like looking at old stuff, a world-class museum of railroad stuff. This is a museum pretty close here, Colfax. I don't know if you've ever been there. Herb Sacalox loves trains, and he's brought in a lot of stuff. He claims, I'm sure it's true, he's got the world's largest private collection of railroad china. Private collection. So there's probably some bigger ones in museums, but he's got railroads from all over, and he's got a lot of stuff. He's open Wednesdays through Sundays. It's right over at Colfax, downtown Colfax. This is up in museum, Spooner. And they have 13 rooms of railroad stuff. And they have a guide there and stuff. It's really neat. There's one room. It's just amazing how much stuff there. And they'll explain they'll have a guide go through and tell you the different stuff. If you like riding trains, this is the Osceola and St. Croix Valley out of Osceola. Beautiful, right along the bluff there. Crosses the St. Croix River and goes to Marine. Then they also go north up to Dresser. Brian Knutson, the guy in the end, restored the depot in Dresser, brought all the stuff in. So if you go in there, he's got, all the equipment at the desk and everything. Really a neat little museum there. There's the bridge going across the river. I'm a member of the Barron County Historical Society. Most of you got a little flyer. And so we have over 40 buildings at our museum, including 18 vintage ones, like this log house right here, the schoolhouse, the jail, the church. And we're open Thursdays through Sundays.
Do you spend any time in that jail?
I should. So many years ago now, they have a little depot they brought in from Ceylon, and it didn't look like that. It was in terrible shape, so I kind of said, it's, you guys need any help? Well, I tore everything out and just cleaned it up and everything. But most of us like cabooses, so I took a project on to, you see caboose on the left there? I got a wood caboose, and that's what it looked like. It looks like it's pretty good. Let me tell you, it was not pretty good. That was up at Spooner. That's our museum, and I bought it from them. I raised the money to buy it. Of course, I have some money in. I didn't do it myself. And a whole wall was rotten. It had a hole in it, so it was mush. So we had to tear out one whole wall. Some were good, like the ends were good. They were covered with plywood. But it took 5 years. We're taking the old plywood off, and the good wood underneath, and you fill all the little holes and paint them and stuff. And that's what it looks like now. And we put a roof over it because there's pine trees, so it's sap and stuff, and birds and stuff. And everything was original in there. It didn't look like that, but all the parts were there. So I really was very lucky. And so we had over 2,000 kids for school tours the last 3 weeks. Not at one time, obviously, but up 100 to 200 every day. And so I just grabbed a couple of pictures. And we take them up in the caboose, let them climb up in the cupola, look out the window, and they take pictures. I include this in all. This is at Hillsdale, south of Barron. But we like to glorify train travel. In the early days, it wasn't glory. These trains were called accommodation, or what's the other?
Mixed trains?
Mixed trains. They'd have freight cars and passenger. You might have a time that you leave in the morning, but it's pretty hard to predict when you're going to get there because they had to stop and switch. This little town called Hillsdale, just south of Barron, had a real little depot. So it's got some passengers on, but they're switching out to the feed mill there, the pickle factory, whatever else. So what did all the people on the train do? They get off the train and just wait on a nice day instead of sit inside. Isn't it amazing about how people dressed? Suits and ties and stuff. I don't know. But anyway, you're at the mercy of the train crew, and when they got there, is what I'm saying. Oh. Most of my books are from this area, where I live in Barron, which isn't that far away. Most of the railroads are out in here where the Omaha Railroad became Chicago Northwestern. So I have 5 Omaha books. And then I kind of started expanding out, you know, and stuff. So I'll show you the pictures of them, probably be easier. That's the first one I did, the Mondovi line. It ran from Fairchild out through Osseo, Strum, Eliva, Mondovi. The Blueberry started in Rice Lake and went up to through Birchwood, Lacutere Indian Reservation, went down to Ridgeland. It was supposed to go down to Menominee, but the hills and stuff, there's no traffic. It was supposed to go Lake Superior, but it ended at Lacutere Indian Reservation. But that's another mixed train, neat shot. At Chippewa Valley, I explained that book there. Cornell line ran from Altoona to Eau Claire, then out to Cornell and a bunch of little towns called Holcomb, Hannibal, ended up at Huey. And this is at Lake Wissota right there. Park Falls line is now the Tuscobia Trail, and my friend Brian's got a 4-wheeler, and he's begging me to do the last part with him there. It ran from north of Rice Lake up through a whole bunch of little towns like Brill, then Birchwood, Draper, Coudray, and all kinds of them up there. Big logging. One quick fact, the last 50 miles to Park Falls, I found evidence of 50 spur lines coming off the last 50 miles into the woods. Big logging. And they'd take these, they have sawmills along the route, and in Rice Lake, they'd also haul logs all the way down to Eau Claire and saw them up. And so it would have really been something to see. I showed you that book there, I guess. The Coon Valley line ran from La Crosse out to Stoddard, Chaseburg, Coon Valley, Westby, and Viroqua. My friend Brian Knutson, on the end of his dad worked for the Milwaukee Road, and he worked in Viroqua and Cashton and stuff. So he collected stuff for 40 years. So I said, you know, I kept telling him to do the book, and it wasn't getting done very fast. And I have a little experience doing it. I said, hey, how about if we go together and work on it? And so we did. And there's actually 2 branches. Another branch comes from Sparta out through Cashton to Westby and Viroqua. So we had to split it into 2 books. And so the second book we're working on right now, this is the Coon Valley, a mixed train. And we just got that done like in February or March. But it came out real good. We're really happy about it.
Is that the one that went through town between 17th Street and 18th, well, I should say 17th Place and 18th Street and then went to University? Is that part of the Coon Valley line?
No, this is on the south end. They used the Burlington Depot. You're thinking of the Green Bay Western track, I think. Green Bay Western actually ran into La Crosse. They used the Chicago Northwestern track from Monona down to get access into La Crosse.
Okay, because the only reason I know anything about it is I actually lived on 17th Place in my backyard, had been the railroad.
Yeah.
And it was, one of my neighbors was actually living there when the railroad was still in use.
Wow.
But when I moved in, it was now private.
Okay, all my books are available in spiral and glued. When we started, we did the glued bindings, and then they showed me the spiral, and the spiral opens so much easier for reading, folds back on itself, you know, and everything. But if you're a book collector, the spiral takes a little room on the shelf, and you don't see the name. So now instead of carrying 8 books around, I got to carry 16 to every single show. And yeah, that's why I brought those guys. And they're in my basement. I got to carry up the, yeah. Anyway, I can still do it. I'm fortunate. Thank you so much for coming.
I told my husband you were going to be here. You wanted me to bring his book and get it signed.
You got one there?
Yeah. He's in Taiwan right now. So.